the American envoy, Steve Witkoff, another real estate man, sent out by the American empire to bring Vladimir Putin to heel, has kind of unceremoniously left Moscow without speaking to Putin, and may have even the fact that he's not a particularly well-known diplomat may have even upset the Russian.
Now, we're speaking and considering all morning the hope, really, for a ceasefire in Ukraine. President Zelensky's described Putin's response to talks between the US envoy and representatives in Moscow as manipulative. He says that Putin just wants to prolong the conflict to keep killing Ukrainians. The Russian president says he will not back a plan that would allow Ukraine to regroup and rearm. Let's speak now to Lloyd, who's in Ukraine for the Sunday Times. Morning, Will.
Good morning, Callum. Hello.
Yeah, really good to speak to you. We're sort of considering really these talks from last night based on the fact that we don't have any readout, we don't have any information. In fact, we've even been scrabbling around for confirmation the talks took place. I mean, the assumption is that they have, but we don't know what they have led to, if anything, at this point.
It seems as if that the American envoy, Steve Witkoff, another real estate man, sent out by the American empire to bring Vladimir Putin to heel, has kind of unceremoniously left Moscow without speaking to Putin, and may have even the fact that he's not a particularly well-known diplomat may have even upset the Russians. I think the key thing that we got from Putin yesterday was that there is a desire on the Russian side to attribute blame and responsibility for how this war began, which I think on the face of it can seem slightly eccentric. But then when you look at past historical peace settlements like the Versailles Treaty or after 1945, both of those were very clear on who was responsible for the war in both cases. So Germany for World War One, Germany and Japan for World War Two. Now, obviously, this is such a huge sticking point in any negotiation because, you know, I've been in Ukraine for 2 weeks. It's the second time I've been here. I have never met a Ukrainian, whether they're a soldier, a plumber, or a politician, who believes that they are responsible for the start of this war in the way that Russians do. So at the moment, it actually, even though there's been a lot of movement this week and it has been very diplomatically successful for the Ukrainians, we're not moving towards a ceasefire if that's what Russia wants.
Yeah, and it's difficult to understand what Russia wants. The sort of growing consensus is that this is about delaying, a ceasefire so Putin and Russia can continue their aggression, perhaps can reclaim Kursk and beyond, potentially, all the while putting up something of a front that there is a negotiation underway. But even in the kind of broad sense of that, the fact that Putin says that they need to remove the underlying causes of the crisis, that he demands Ukraine mustn't join NATO, that the land that they have taken must be recognised internationally as Russian, and that peacekeepers from Europe/NATO are not welcome as part of all of this. Some of those things, I suppose, are for further down the line, but it does really stall progress.
I mean, what's the difference between what Putin wants and what Stalin wanted in the early Cold War? He's effectively saying, look, that Eastern Europe is my sphere of influence. I don't want anybody else to have anything to do with it. And the United States shouldn't have a role in this. That's very difficult for even Trump to accept at the moment, it seems like. In terms of what's happening in Kursk, we were up near Sumi this week, and you could see that Ukrainians were being pulled out of that area. But as the troops who have been fighting the Russians in Russia were being pulled out, huge numbers of replacements were coming in, armor was coming in, and that area around Sumi, I haven't really seen this reported yet, but it's full of barbed wire and trenches and bunkers and emplacements and hedgehog tank traps. And so if the Russians and their North Korean allies are going to cross from Russian territory further into Ukraine, there is going to be a serious fight there. And that's already started. We've seen last night there were some evacuations of villages just north of Sumi. Perhaps, if the Russians can't be stopped up there, then Sumi might be evacuated. But again, what we see is that the Ukrainian sort of will to fight is very durable. I spent part of this week with volunteers who actually were paying a Ukrainian army unit to train them. And they're very young, they're very raw, they're very enthusiastic. They want to keep fighting because, as you know, that list of Russian demands you just read out is very, very far away from again, any Ukrainian you will meet in Kyiv or elsewhere.
Yeah, which I think is fascinating, just that resilience that has lasted for so long. Is there any prospect of, I suppose, movement in terms of who is involved in this? So there was one report I was reading that suggested a kind of an idea, a theory, whereby Ukraine could choose to fight on even without America and with the odds stacked against them as a result. And I suppose I'm asking that question based on what we've already heard from our experts this morning, that Trump could frankly take the huff with all of this, you know, not to trivialize it, but he could be just rubbed up the wrong way by Putin's approach and throw his toys out the pram and walk away from the whole thing, and then we'd all wonder where on earth we were left.
Well, we'd be left in a strange way. I've been thinking about this, you know, why am I in this war? Why is this war happening? In a strange way, it is to do with the splintering of Pax Americana. For, you know, this war started because in some ways Putin looked at Joe Biden and looked at Biden's America and looked at the retreat of America from Afghanistan and thought that he had a chance to take Ukraine because American power was waning. And now what we're seeing is that Trump, who said in February that maybe Ukrainians will be Russian one day, and has said that he could solve this war in 24 hours. What we're seeing is that the Americans actually can't get Russia to the table this week in a real way. In terms of the Ukrainian resistance, yeah, I mean, I think that they will just carry on, even without major air defenses, even if it's an insurgency. It really is not something that many Ukrainians, you know, actually want. You know, they don't want to have to fight an insurgency for 20 years against a Russian empire, but will they do it? I have absolutely no doubt that they will. Yeah. You can see this in multiple big surveys of Ukrainian opinion since the start of the war. And the thing you have to ask yourself is why? Why are Ukrainians like this? And what I get from talking to Ukrainians over and over again is that many people here in this sort of central or western region of Ukraine will have family members in eastern Ukraine who have experienced Russian occupation with arbitrary detention, with torture, all of this very well documented approach of the Russian occupiers in eastern Ukraine.
Yeah.
And that really spurs people into not wanting to be occupied by Russia at all.
Well, always really good to speak to you. Thank you very much, and we'll keep in touch.
Cheers,
thanks now. That's Lloyd reporting from Ukraine for the Sunday Times.